February 8th, 1945, 14:37 hours, Friedrichshafen, Germany. The workshop smelled of machine oil and cold concrete. Dr. Ernst Reinhardt stood in the converted underground factory, hands clasped behind his back, staring at the machine before him. An American M4A3 Sherman tank, captured 3 weeks ago near Bastogne. Driven here under its own power, 180 kilometers through winter roads by German soldiers who couldn't quite believe what they were driving. 52 years old, chief engineer at Zahnradfabrik Friedrichshafen, ZEF Transmissions. Reinhardt had spent 3 decades perfecting the art of mechanical power transfer. Panzer III gearboxes, Panzer IV final drives, each component machined to tolerances measured in microns. Each assembly hand-fitted by craftsmen who understood that precision was not just engineering, it was philosophy. The Sherman sat under harsh electric lights, mud still caked on its tracks, American White Star barely visible under European dirt. It looked crude. Utilitarian. Everything a proper combat vehicle should not be. Beside Reinhardt stood Oberleutnant Victor Brenner, 45, panzer officer. The left sleeve of his uniform hung empty, pinned at the elbow. Lost the hand at Kursk in 43 when his Tiger's engine caught fire and the hatch mechanism jammed. These things happened when components weren't engineered to tolerate battlefield stress, when perfection met chaos and shattered. "It doesn't look like much," Brenner said, his voice carrying the flat effect of a man who'd seen too many perfect machines fail at the wrong moment. "That," Reinhardt replied, "is precisely what concerns me." The assignment from OKW, Oberkommando der Wehrmacht High Command, was clear. Analyze this American tank. Find its weaknesses. Identify the shortcuts, the compromises, the inevitable failures that came from mass production. Prove that German engineering superiority wasn't just propaganda. It was measurable, scientific, real. Reinhardt needed this to be true. His son Georg had died 6 months ago. July 1944, Normandy, Panzer IV commander, 24 years old. The tank had suffered transmission failure during the retreat from Caen. Crew ordered to abandon the vehicle. Georg stayed behind to properly set the demolition charges, wanted to deny the enemy a working tank. American advance came faster than expected. Brief firefight. Georg didn't make it out. The telegram had been brief. Gefallen für Führer und Vaterland. Fallen for Führer and Fatherland. Now Reinhardt stood before this American machine, and somewhere in the cold reasoning of a father's grief, he needed it to be inferior. Needed the evidence that his son had died fighting superior equipment, not failed by his own side's obsession with perfection over practicality. 3 other engineers worked in the bay. Among them stood Edmund Weber, 57, old school in every sense. Trained under the same masters as Reinhard. Weber represented the engineering establishment that believed German precision was not just superior, it was ordained. They moved around the Sherman with calipers and micrometers, taking measurements, calling out specifications. Their voices echoed in the underground space. Germany was running out of places to build things above ground. Hauptmann Lukas Hoffmann entered from the administrative offices. 38, logistics officer, ordnance supply for the entire Southern Army Group. He carried folders thick with inventory reports and requisition denials. He'd seen the numbers, knew what those numbers meant. Ernst Hoffmann said using first names despite rank differences. They'd known each other since before the war, when engineering problems were solved with mathematics instead of lives. "How long do you need?" 10 days, Reinhardt replied. "Complete analysis, full documentation. You have until the 18th. OKW wants the report for the weekly briefing. 10 days to disassemble 30 tons of American steel and find the weakness that would justify everything. Reinhardt approached the Sherman, touched the hull. The armor was cast, not rolled plate. Welded construction rather than the interlocking precision of German assembly. His fingers traced the welds. Crude technique, large beads, but structurally sound. He'd seen worse welds fail under stress. These wouldn't. Begin with external examination, he instructed. Armor composition, welding quality, construction methodology, document everything. The team went to work. February 9th, 1945, day 2. The findings were wrong. That was Reinhardt's first thought as he reviewed the initial analysis. Wrong because they contradicted what he needed to be true. The armor plating was adequate. Not excellent. The Germans had been right about that. Frontal thickness, inferior to a Panther. But the sloping, the angles. Effective thickness, after accounting for deflection geometry, was better than the raw numbers suggested. Someone in Detroit had understood trigonometry. The welding, despite its crude appearance, showed no critical defects. Stress testing on sample sections revealed proper penetration, good fusion. It would hold. The suspension system, vertical volute spring suspension the Americans called it, was almost insultingly simple. But it worked. The bogie wheels showed even wear patterns. The springs, despite being exposed to mud ice and 3 months of combat operations, maintained their tension. Brenner stood beside Reinhardt's desk, reading over his shoulder. "No critical defects," the Oberleutnant said. Statement, not question. "Not yet. Ernst, I've seen these tanks in combat. They're not invincible. We've killed hundreds of them. And yet there are always more." Reinhardt stood, walked to the window. Not a real window, just a painted frame on concrete wall. Underground factory, underground workshop, underground war. Germany was learning to live like moles. "You know what troubles me most," Reinhardt continued. "We captured this tank operational. Crew abandoned it for lack of ammunition, not mechanical failure. It drove 180 kilometers to get here. No breakdowns, no repairs needed." "One tank, anecdotal." "Is it?" Reinhardt turned back. "Intelligence reports say American armored divisions maintain 85% operational availability. Our best panzer divisions manage 40. Brenner's jaw tightened. He knew those numbers too. "The Americans have more tanks," he said. "More factories. More resources." "Yes, but that doesn't explain why their tanks keep running." Reinhardt returned to his desk, pulled out a folder containing technical specifications for the Panther Ausf. G, his transmission design, pride of German engineering. 5 forward-speed synchronized shift-controlled differential, capable of transferring 700 horsepower through a vehicle weighing 45 tons. Tolerances held to 0.005 inches. Each gear tooth hand-inspected. Each bearing race polished to mirror finish. Beautiful. Also prone to final drive failures. Oil seal problems. Gear wear under sustained combat loading. Average time between major maintenance 150 kilometers. Repair time when components failed 18 to 24 hours minimum. If parts existed, if specialized tools were available, if trained mechanics could be spared from other broken machines, he'd designed a masterpiece. And masterpieces, he was beginning to understand, were expensive in ways that had nothing to do with Reichsmarks. "Continue the analysis," Reinhardt told his team the next morning. "Focus on the drivetrain, the transmission and final drives. If there's a critical weakness, it will be there." February 10th, 1945. Day 3. They cracked open the transmission casing at 0900 hours. The Sherman had been driven hard, but maintained well fluid, dark, but clean, no metal particles. Reinhardt supervised personally, while Friedrich Adler, 28 youngest engineer, Technical University. Munich examined the final drives on canvas-lined workbenches. The main gearbox casing was aluminum alloy, lighter than steel. That would have been heresy in German design 3 years ago, but the casting was thick, ribbed for strength. It would hold. They lifted the casing free. The gear assemblies lay exposed. Reinhardt measured with calipers. Gear teeth within spec, even where proper heat treatment. Tolerances, 0.05 inches looser than German standard, but adequate. The gears wouldn't sing like a Panther transmission, but they'd work. "Herr Doctor," Adler called from the main gear assembly. "There's something here." Reinhardt crossed to the workbench. Adler pointed to the connection between the output gear and the drive shaft. A perfectly machined gear hardened steel precision tolerances, connected to the shaft by a cylindrical pin approximately 5/8 inch in diameter, 2 inches long. Nothing unusual about that. Power transfer through shear pins was common mechanical practice. Except. Reinhardt leaned closer. The pin had a circumferential groove machined around its center, a deliberate reduction in cross-sectional area, perhaps 40% smaller than the main shaft diameter. "Manufacturing defect," Adler suggested. Reinhardt pulled out his magnifying glass. The kind watchmakers used, examined the groove in detail. The machining was perfect. Clean tool marks, precise depth, consistent width. This wasn't damage. This wasn't a mistake. This was intentional. He measured the groove depth with calipers, calculated the stress concentration. A first-year engineering student could tell you what this groove would do: create a deliberate weak point, a designed failure location. "Check the other side," Reinhardt ordered. Adler disassembled the opposite drive assembly. Same configuration, same pin, same groove, identical dimensions within measurement tolerance. Deliberate, repeated, intentional. The workshop went quiet. The other engineers gathered around. They saw what Reinhardt saw, understood what it meant. The Americans had installed a component designed to fail, not designed to break under manufacturing defect, Not designed to fail due to poor materials or inadequate engineering. Designed to fail. Reinhardt felt something cold settle in his chest. This wasn't the weakness he'd been looking for. This was something else. Something that didn't fit the framework of engineering principles he'd spent 30 years building his career upon. "I need to speak with the American crew," he said quietly. "Now." The interrogation room table, 3 chairs, single bulb casting hard shadows. Sergeant Dalton Mercer, 32, Sherman Commander, 4th Armored. Captured. January 28th near St. Vith. Ran out of ammunition. Not mechanical failure. Mercer was taller than Reinhardt expected. His uniform was worn but clean. The POW camp was following Geneva Conventions mostly. His hands showed calluses. Working hands. Reinhardt recognized them. His own father had been a machinist. Brenner sat in the corner observing. Hoffman stood by the door. Reinhardt placed the shear pin on the table between them. The metal clinked against wood. "Sergeant Mercer," Reinhardt began in careful English. He'd learned the language before the war when German and American engineers still exchanged technical papers. "I need you to explain this component." Mercer glanced at the pin. Recognition immediate. "That's a shear pin, sir. I know what it is called. I want to know why it is deliberately weakened." Reinhardt pointed to the groove. "This is not manufacturing error. This is intentional design. Explain." Mercer picked up the pin, turned it in his fingers, seemed to be deciding how much to say. "Sir, it's designed to break," he said finally. "That's its job." The room was very quiet. "Designed to fail," Reinhardt repeated, making sure he'd heard correctly. "You are telling me American engineers intentionally installed a component meant to break inside a combat vehicle?" "Yes, sir." "That is absurd. That is—" Reinhardt struggled for the English word. "That is engineering malpractice." Mercer met his eyes. No hostility there, just certainty. "Sir, with respect, it's the reason I'm alive." He set the pin back on the table. "When my tank hits something big, rock, tree stump, doesn't matter. The whole drivetrain takes a shock. Tons of force. Instant. That force has to go somewhere." He tapped the pin. "This breaks. Clean shear. Takes about 45 minutes to replace. I carry 6 spares in my tool locker." Mercer leaned back in his chair. "Without that pin, that force goes straight to the gearbox, cracks the housing, twists the output shaft, maybe breaks gear teeth. That's not a field repair, sir. That's a depot job. Weeks of work. If the parts even exist." He picked up the pin again, held it to the light. "This costs maybe 50 cents. A transmission costs $2,400. We sacrifice the pin to save the transmission. Simple math." Brenner spoke from the corner, his voice thoughtful. "A mechanical fuse." "Exactly, sir," Mercer replied. "Blow a fuse in your house, you replace the fuse. You don't rebuild the entire electrical system." Reinhardt sat down slowly. His mind was racing, trying to integrate this information into frameworks that suddenly seemed inadequate. "How many times," he asked, "have you replaced this pin?" "On my tank. 7 times since Normandy." "Took us anywhere from 30 minutes to 2 hours depending on conditions. Longest was at night in the rain under artillery fire. Even then, we had the tank running again before dawn." 7 times. 7 instances where a German tank would have been abandoned. 7 times this American machine kept fighting because someone had designed it to break in exactly the right way. "Your manual," Reinhardt said. "Do you have procedures for this repair?" "Yes, sir. TM 9759. Section 8. Step-by-step instructions with pictures. Any crew member with basic tools can do it." Pictures. Instructions for common soldiers. The concept was almost alien. German technical manuals assumed expertise, knowledge, years of training. "And your training?" 2 weeks on maintenance procedures. They taught us what breaks most often and how to fix it fast. Shear pins, track links, road wheels. The common failures. Common failures. The Americans had analyzed their tanks, identified the most likely breakpoints, and designed them to be easily replaceable. They'd accepted failure as inevitable and engineered around it. Reinhardt had spent his career trying to prevent failure entirely. "Thank you, Sergeant," Reinhardt said quietly. "That will be all." As the guards escorted Mercer out, the American paused at the door. "Sir, can I ask you something?" Reinhardt nodded. "Your tanks, Panthers, Tigers, they're incredible machines. Best armor, best guns, but—" Mercer hesitated. "Why do your crews abandon so many of them? We find them everywhere. Perfect tanks, just sitting there." Reinhardt had no answer. After Mercer left, The three Germans sat in silence. A mechanical fuse, Brenner repeated. They design their tanks to break. No, Reinhardt said slowly. They design their tanks to be fixed. There's a difference. He picked up the shear pin. Such a simple thing. Cheap metal. Deliberately weakened. Worth less than a litre of gasoline. This pin represented something Reinhardt was only beginning to understand. A philosophy that didn't ask, how perfect can we make this, but instead asked, how quickly can we fix this when it breaks? The first question led to masterpieces. The second question apparently led to victory. That night, Reinhardt studied TM 9 to 759 at 0200 hours. Page 247 shear pin replacement. Step-by-step photos of a 19-year-old performing the procedure. Estimated time, 30 to 60 minutes. Tools, standard toolkit. Skill basic mechanical aptitude. He compared it to his Panther manual. D656-27, 628 pages of dense technical German. Final drive replacement. 18 to 24 hours specialized equipment, depot level only. The Americans shipped complete transmissions as consumables. If component damaged, discard and replace. Never repair, never salvage, just replace. He thought about Hoffman's reports. Panthers waiting weeks for parts that never arrived. American depots stocking hundreds of identical units, swapping components in hours. They'd built a system, not just a tank. The Americans valued the soldier's ability to fight more than the engineer's pride in perfection. Reinhardt opened his desk drawer. Inside Georg's medals, the telegram announcing his death. Gefallen für Führer und Vaterland. His son had died in a Panther with transmission failure, abandoned during retreat. Could not be recovered. The shear pin sat on Reinhardt's desk. Small, cheap, deliberately flawed. It represented bringing soldiers home alive. He had 7 days until his report was due. 7 days to explain they'd been wrong about everything. February 11th, 1945, morning briefing. Reinhardt stood before his team in the main workshop. The Sherman sat partially disassembled behind him, its mechanical guts exposed like a patient on an operating table. 6 engineers, Brenner, Hoffman, all waiting for direction. Gentlemen, we've been asking the wrong question, Reinhardt began. Not what is weak, but what is the purpose of this weakness? He held up the shear pin. The Americans didn't compromise. They optimized for a different goal. Weber stood abruptly. This is defeatist talk. Abandon our standards. Build crude machines. Our standards are killing our soldiers, Reinhardt said quietly. Georg's Panther had perfect armor, perfect gun, perfect transmission. It broke down during retreat. He died destroying it to prevent capture. A Sherman with this component would have been running in an hour. The workshop went silent. Brenner stood his empty sleeve, a reminder that theory met reality on battlefields. Show them the numbers, Lucas, he said. Hoffman opened his folders. The logistics reports he'd been compiling for weeks. He spread them across a table. Current armored vehicle inventory, Heeresgruppe South, Hoffman began. 107 3 tanks. Operational status, 68 tanks, 39% availability. He pulled out another sheet. Reasons for non-operational combat damage, 14 vehicles. Awaiting recovery, 23. In depot for repair, 68. But we're not repairing them properly, we're cannibalizing. Pulling components from the least damaged to keep a few running. He set down the papers. The Americans' intelligence estimates 82 to 85% operational availability across all armored units in Western Europe. They have more factories, Weber objected, more resources. They have better logistics, Brenner countered, which matters more when your perfect tank sits broken in a field. Reinhardt walked to the chalkboard, drew 2 curves. German approach maximize component strength. When failure occurs, repair is complex, time-consuming, requires specialized skills and parts. Second curve. American approach, accept failure will occur. Design for rapid replacement. Simple procedures. Common parts. Crew-level maintenance. He wrote, German high reliability, very high repair time. American medium reliability, very low repair time. Multiply by number of tanks in theater. Account for logistics chains. Calculate operational availability over time. The equation was brutal. Lower individual reliability, but much faster repair meant more tanks fighting more often. They sacrifice perfection for availability, Reinhardt concluded, and availability wins wars. Weber was still resisting, but his voice had lost conviction. The numbers didn't lie. Reinhardt looked at each man. Continue the analysis. I want complete documentation of American maintenance philosophy. Lucas, everything we have on their logistics system. Victor, any intelligence on depot operations? We have 6 days. February 12th, 1945. Afternoon session. Hoffman had brought something new, a captured American document. Supply manifest from U.S. Army Ordnance Depot, Liège, Belgium. Dated January 15th, 1945. Sherman M4 series. Stocked components, complete transmissions, 3 and 40 units. Shear pins, 12,000. Engines, 180. Final drives, 480. Track links, 86,000. One depot could rebuild an entire armoured division twice over. Hoffman laid out comparison documents. Heeresgerät Park München, German equivalent. Panther final drives, 11 units need 67. Tiger wheels, 34 need 218. Engines, 2 need 23. Availability, 16%. Cross-compatibility analysis revealed the deeper problem: American M4 variants shared identical transmissions. German Panzer IV Ausf H parts didn't fit Ausf J Panther Ausf A, incompatible with Ausf G, 47 different assemblies, none interchangeable. Adler was calculating on his notepad. American logistics officer stocks 1 transmission type for 4 vehicle variants. We need 47 different assemblies for equivalent coverage. Correct, Hoffman said. That's not a logistics challenge, that's impossibility. Brenner had been listening in silence. Now he spoke. Kursk, summer 43. My Tiger battalion started with 45 tanks. After 3 weeks, 12 running. Combat losses 9 tanks. The other 24 broken down. Thrown tracks we couldn't repair. Engine fires, final drive failures. We had to abandon 18. Perfectly good guns, impenetrable armor. Just couldn't move. His voice was flat, reciting facts without emotion. The emotion had burned out somewhere in the Russian mud. Meanwhile, I watched Russian T-34s, crude, uncomfortable, poorly finished, keep running, keep fighting. They won through availability. We lost through complexity. Reinhardt was still studying the supply manifest. 12,000 shear pins, 12,000 sacrificial components waiting to save 12,000 transmissions. The mathematics was brutal in its clarity. Germans built perfect tanks that broke and couldn't be fixed. Americans built adequate tanks that broke and were running again by nightfall. There's something else, Hoffman said. He pulled out reconnaissance photos. American depot repair operations, the Robinson Depot system, forward area facilities designed like factory assembly lines. The photographs showed rows of damaged tanks in orderly lines. Process is standardized. Damaged tank arrives, 15-minute inspection assigned to specific bay. Crews work in shifts. Disassemble damaged components, install replacement units, test, return to service. Time from arrival to departure. Transmission replacement 4 to 6 hours. Engine swap 8 to 12. Major combat damage 24 to 48 hours. Hoffman set down the photos. Our depot operations Panther needing final drive 18 to 24 hours if parts exist. Average wait time for critical parts 6 to 8 weeks, if they arrive. Monthly throughput. Liège Depot 180 to 200 tanks repaired monthly. München 20 to 30 when parts available. 6 times the repair rate, and the Americans had multiple depots. Reinhardt stood, walked to the window that wasn't a window, stared at painted concrete. They designed an entire system, not just tanks. Manufacturing, supply, maintenance, repair, all integrated, all optimized for one goal: maximum operational availability under combat conditions. He turned back. We designed perfect tanks, then tried to build a system around them. They designed an imperfect tank that fit perfectly into the system they'd already built. February 12, 1945. Evening. Reinhardt's quarters. Brenner entered carrying a folder. Ernst recovered personal effects from your son's unit. I thought you should have these before they're filed away. Inside Georg's field journal. Letters he'd written but never sent. Reinhardt's hands shook as he opened them. May 15th, 1944. Before invasion. Vater, our Panzer IV is magnificent. Only concern yesterday replaced final drive bearing, took 6 hours with depot help. Waited 4 days for part from Paris. But this is minor. June 19th, 1944. Normandy retreat. Company started with 14 tanks, now 6 operational. Not from combat, from breakdowns. Oberfeld-Webel Hartmann's tank threw track 2 days ago. Still sitting there. Americans seem to have endless Shermans. We knock out 3-5 more appear. How do they repair so quickly? July 8th, 1944, 4 days before death. Vater, something troubles me. Yesterday found abandoned American Sherman. Transmission damaged, but crew had attempted field repair, removed inspection plate, accessed internals, fresh tool marks. They were fixing it when forced to withdraw. Our doctrine, damaged transmission equals recovery vehicle. Their doctrine, crew fixes it themselves. Last week, Lieutenant Steiner's Panther broke down. Perfect gun, perfect armor, broken transmission. Had to destroy it with grenades. Crew devastated. That tank was their home for 8 months. Sometimes I wonder if Americans understand something we don't. Their tanks are crude, but always there, always running. If I could ask one thing, design a tank that a common soldier can keep running. Not a masterpiece. A tool. A reliable tool. Your loving son, Georg. 4 days later, transmission failure during retreat. Georg stayed to set demolition charges. Caught by American advance. Killed. Reinhardt's vision blurred. His son had understood. Had tried to tell him. And he'd been too proud to listen.
Brenner stood silent at the door. He knew, Reinhardt whispered. He knew before we did.
February 13th, 1945. The team assembled their findings. Adler had created comparison charts. Sherman shear pin replacement, 45 minutes. Panther final drive replacement, 20 hours, minimum. Sherman transmission swap, 4 hours. Panther transmission rebuild, 18 to 24 hours. Sherman engine replacement, 8 hours. Panther engine replacement, 16 to 20 hours. Every comparison favored the American approach by factors of 4 to 10. But our components last longer, Weber pointed out weakly. Lower failure rate. Brenner had combat reports. Panther mean distance between final drive failures approximately 150 kilometers. Sherman approximately 800 kilometers before shear pin replacement needed. But from crew perspective, Panther brakes needs specialized repair 20 hours if parts exist. Sherman brakes crew fixes it 45 minutes. He tapped the reports. Mission readiness is what matters. American tank might break more often, but it's back faster. Net result, more time fighting. Operational availability over 1 month. German Panther 40% availability. American Sherman 85% availability. Reinhardt walked to the chalkboard. Wrote, effectiveness equals capability x availability. If Panther is 1.5 times more effective in combat than Sherman, but available only 40% of time, effective combat power equals 0.6. Sherman at full capability, available 85% of time, equals 0.85. The numbers didn't lie. Inferior tank wins through superior availability. We gave them that advantage by refusing to compromise our standards. February 14th, 1945. Evening. Reinhardt walked the ruined streets. Germany freezing, starving, collapsing. Still building perfect tanks while lacking fuel parts crews. Mercer had replaced that shear pin 7 times. 7 times back in action within hours. 7 times a German crew would have been walking home. The Americans had built a system where adequate components perfectly integrated became unstoppable. Germany had built isolated masterpieces, brilliant but fragile. He thought about the shear pin, that simple component that had unraveled 30 years of certainty. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent his career building transmissions that wouldn't fail, designing systems with maximum strength at every point. No weak links, no compromises. And the Americans had won by deliberately installing the weak link, by accepting failure and making it irrelevant. It went against everything he'd been taught, everything he'd believed. But Georg had understood. A 24-year-old tank commander, not an engineer, had seen what his father couldn't, that the perfect was the enemy of the good enough, that the tank that kept running mattered more than the tank that was perfectly built. February 15th, 1945. Final preparation. The evidence was overwhelming. American maintenance doctrine. Maintenance is battle. Speed of repair is as important as quality. When in doubt, replace. German maintenance doctrine. All repairs must be performed to specification using approved tools and genuine parts. Field expedient repairs are temporary only. 2 philosophies. 2 different understandings of what war required. Americans fix it fast. Good enough is good enough. Germans fix it right. Quality matters. In peacetime, the German approach was superior. In war, it was suicide. The team compiled the final statistics. Production time. Sherman, 10,000 man-hours versus Panther, 55,000. Cost $44,000 versus $117,000. Parts count, 8,000 fewer components. Maintenance simplicity, crew level versus depot level. Every metric confirmed the same conclusion. Reinhardt looked at the calendar. February 15th, 3 days until the report was due. 3 days to explain to men who didn't want to hear it that Germany had lost the engineering war before the shooting ever started. Weber approached him privately. Ernst, if you present this, they'll call you defeatist, perhaps worse. I know. Is it worth it? Reinhardt thought of Georg, of the letters, of the request to design tanks that soldiers could keep running. Yes, he said. It's worth it, he said.
February 16th, 1945. Reinhardt wrote the final conclusions. Not for the official report that would be technical, careful, diplomatic. This was personal, for himself, for anyone who might read it after everything ended. The American M4 Sherman is inferior by every traditional metric, yet it is more effective. This paradox reveals truth we failed to understand. Effectiveness in war is determined by sustainability of the system, not quality of components. We asked, how strong? They asked, how fixable? My son understood before I did. He died because German engineering valued pride over practicality. We built for eternity. They built for Tuesday. Tuesday after Tuesday, they won. He sealed it in an envelope. Personal, not for distribution. Then he took one of the shear pins, cleaned it carefully, placed it in a small wooden box from his desk, engraved a label with his machinist's tools, Das Teil das den Krieg gewann, the part that won the war. He would keep this.
A reminder of the price of pride, of the cost of perfection, of the son who understood what his father could not. Tomorrow he would present his findings to OKW. They would not listen, but he would present them anyway. February 18th, 1945. OKW headquarters. 1400 hours. The conference room was cold. Everything was cold in Germany now. Fuel shortages meant minimal heating even in command facilities. Reinhardt stood at the head of the table. His report, 60 pages, technical drawings, comparative analyses, sat in folders before each officer. General Major Dietrich von Schellenberg, 58, Ordnance Corps Commander, Career Officer, Traditional Mindset. Oberst Wolfgang Krantz, 52, Armored Warfare Doctrine. More pragmatic but constrained by institutional inertia. Standartenführer Hermann Voigt, 41, Nazi Party Observer, Political Officer. Here to ensure ideological purity. 3 other staff officers, stenographer and Brenner, representing field perspective. Gentlemen, Reinhardt began.
You requested analysis of captured Sherman tank to identify exploitable weaknesses. I have completed that analysis.
He opened to the first technical drawings. The Sherman is well constructed. I found a deliberately engineered weakness, a shear pin designed to fail protecting the entire system. This represents fundamental philosophical difference. We designed to prevent failure. They designed to manage it. He showed the data, American 85% operational availability versus German 40%. Depot comparisons, logistics analysis. American Ordnance Depot stocks more spare transmissions than all our depots combined. They can rebuild an armored division faster than we can repair 1 battalion. Voigt stood furious. You suggest American crudeness defeats German excellence. I'm stating mathematical reality. The Sherman has 8,000 fewer parts, costs half as much, takes 1/5 the production time. Their system is integrated for sustainability.
Your recommendation? Krantz asked.
Immediate standardization, simplified procedures, sacrificial components, crew training, minimum 18 months implementation.
Silence. Everyone understood. Germany didn't have 18 months. Reinhardt set Georg's letters on the table. My son, Panzer IV commander, wrote to me 4 days before his death. He asked me to design tanks that soldiers could keep running. Not masterpieces. Tools. I didn't listen. He died because we valued excellence over effectiveness. His voice was steady, but the pain was visible. So, yes, Herr Standartenführer, American crudeness defeats German excellence, because they understood war is won by weapons that work, not weapons that impress. Von Schellenberg closed the report folder slowly. Thank you, Dr. Reinhardt. We will take your findings under advisement. Translation filed and forgotten.
February 19th, 1945. Brenner brought after-action reports from 2nd Panzer Division Ardennes offensive. Oberstleutnant Hartmann's battalion started with 38 Panthers, ended with 4 operational after 12 days. Mechanical failures exceeded combat losses. 3-1. American Sherman strength appeared unchanged. Rapid depot repair kept them fighting. Hartmann's final recommendation: complete doctrine review of armored vehicle sustainability. Filed. Ignored. Reinhardt read it in silence. Every report said the same thing. Every field commander saw the same pattern. Only the engineers and the leadership refused to accept it. What happens now? He asked Brenner. Now they file your report. Continue building perfect tanks we can't maintain. The war ends. We lose. And after? Brenner shrugged with his remaining shoulder. After? Perhaps someone learns from this. February 20th, 1945. Workshop late evening. The Sherman reassembled orders to transport it elsewhere. Reinhardt wrote a final addendum, not for official files, for himself. The American M4 Sherman is inferior by every traditional metric, yet it is more effective. This paradox reveals truth. We failed to understand. Effectiveness in war is determined by sustainability of the system, not quality of components. We asked, how strong? They asked, how fixable? The first leads to masterpieces that cannot be sustained. The second leads to tools that win wars. My son understood before I did. He died because German engineering valued pride over practicality. We built for eternity. They built for Tuesday. Tuesday after Tuesday they won. He sealed it, placed the shear pin in its wooden box, engraved Das Teil das den Krieg gewann. This pin represented everything Reinhardt had learned too late, that his son had been right, that the soldiers mattered more than the machines.
That survival trumped excellence. Tomorrow others would come for the Sherman, would transport it somewhere else for more analysis that would lead to nothing. The war was already lost. The lessons would go unlearned. But perhaps someday someone would find this box, would read the report, would understand. March 7th, 1945, Ludendorff Bridge, Remagen. Reinhardt and Brenner had been evacuated west as Russian forces approached. They'd ended up near the Rhine watching the collapse accelerate. Now they stood on a hillside overlooking the bridge. American forces had captured it intact. German demolitions failed. Now American armor poured across. Through binoculars, Reinhardt watched a Sherman column advancing under German artillery fire. One tank took a near miss. Stopped. Reinhardt checked his watch. Crew dismounted, opened inspection plates. Shells impacted 50 yards away. The men worked steadily, methodically. Another impact closer. One soldier knocked flat, got up, continued working. The crew chief was underneath now, visible only as legs protruding. Wrench work. Deliberate movements despite the artillery. Another shell, this one only 30 yards away. Shrapnel pinged off the Sherman's hull. The soldier underneath didn't stop. Reinhardt felt his chest tighten. That could have been Georg. Should have been Georg. If German tanks had been designed for soldiers instead of engineers. 12 minutes. The Sherman restarted. Crew mounted up. Tank drove forward. Column continued. The shear pin, Brenner said quietly. On the east bank, a King Tiger sat in perfect firing position. 88mm gun that could destroy any Allied armor at 2 kilometers. Impenetrable armor, the most powerful tank in the world. Immobilized. Engine failure. Crew long gone. The contrast was absolute. German perfection sat silent, useless. American pragmatism kept fighting, kept soldiers alive. There is the entire war, Reinhardt said. We built monuments. They built tools. Brenner lowered his binoculars. How did we not see this? We saw what we wanted to see, believed our superiority in craft meant superiority in war. But war doesn't care about craft. War cares about availability. They watched the American tanks roll across the bridge. Dozens, hundreds, an endless stream. Behind them somewhere were the depots, the spare parts, the replacement units, the mechanics who could swap a transmission in 4 hours, the system that kept those tanks moving. Germany had nothing comparable, had never built anything comparable, had never conceived that such a system was necessary. A flight of American aircraft passed overhead, P-47 Thunderbolts, not precision instruments, heavy, simple, rugged, built by thousands, maintained easily, always available. Same philosophy, same result. We thought we were building the future, Reinhardt said. Turns out we were building museum pieces. April 30th, 1945. Friedrichshafen, American